So time for a really big Warhammer 40k news roundup. We've got a new Autarch for the Eldari, the news of a Warhammer World in the USA, lots of new lore articles and teasers about the big release weekend, and all manner of other minor reveals and teasers. Let's talk about what's been going on. Hello and welcome back to All Tactics, where today we're doing a roundup of the Warhammer 40k news, rumours and all other things that have been going on. And basically for this one, doing a great big roundup video of things from the last couple of weeks that I thought were interesting enough and wanted to talk about, though I thought maybe didn't need an entire video all to themselves. I've not done a proper one of these for a little while, so really quite a lot to cover today. We'll start out with a quick check-in on the big Titus release and see which miniatures are actually going to be selling or left on the shelves. There's this new limited Autarch for the Eldari, news of a new Warhammer World opening up in the USA, which I'm sure might be of interest to many. Nekrosor Ammentar might have a feel no pain type save as per the app. There's a further thing that you guys spotted with a hint in the New Year's teasers. We've had loads of lore articles for the 500 Worlds books that Games Workshop have given us more teasers for, plenty of lore ones and also breakdowns of how the boarding actions and the narrative books work. There's been a couple of fun Warhammer animated teasers, one for Orks in Dawn of War, and some more details as to the Warhammer Plus animations coming up. Games Workshop are giving out free Servitors in their Warhammer stores, a fun picture being circulated that definitely isn't a Commissar Yarrick Leak. Games Workshop doing some end of year stuff with their mini of the year, and looking at the Rumour Engine. As ever, lots of stuff to talk about. First up, it's the first big release weekend for Warhammer 40k with the 500 Worlds oncoming. Pre-orders generally going live between Friday night and Saturday morning around the world, and then models shipping out and full sale in stores on the 24th of January. We've got the 500 Worlds book, Captain Titus, and then a bunch of Necron releases. I was interested to see which miniatures were looking like the most and least popular. If you were looking to pick up any of the miniatures, check out the channel's affiliate links down in the video description. They can save a bit versus the Games Workshop web store around the world, around 15% off for Element Games in the UK, 21% for Gap Games in Australia, 10 to 15% for Toy Snowman and Fenris Workshop in Canada, 15% for Wargame Portal in the USA, and 16% for Taschengeld Eat plus a discount code in Germany and the EU. From a few channel polls, I thought it would be interesting to see what was actually popular, and it seems that Games Workshop have done fairly well to make most of their offerings pretty interesting to a lot of people here, though at the same time some of them are definitely a bit pricier compared with what you'd want. Between the book and the major model releases, from my polls it looked like 217 people wanted to pick up the 500 Worlds Titus book set, despite it having a big price tag at $80 or £50 or €65. This one has 4 books in it, the lore, boarding actions, narrative rules, and the rules leaflet. I kind of wonder if there'll be quite as much interest now they've already released all of that digitally. I wouldn't be too surprised if that maybe makes these sales a little bit lower than stated. Then seems that lots of people are interested in the 500 Worlds Battalion box set for the Necrons, though not as much as the full new miniatures. It does look like quite a good deal on some fun miniatures that are quite well received and good in game. Price set around Combat Patrol prices and around 33% off. My guess is that as per usual they'll probably make far too few of these though. If you want them at discount, I'd probably aim to be early. Then seemingly third most popular are Titus and the Wardens of Ultramar. Maybe no big surprise that the main character of Space Marine 2 gets a lot of interest, though again I do wonder if the price tag might affect sales a bit from them. It's just unusually expensive with that command squad at a massive $94, £57 or €74. They're certainly paying the named character tax in a big way. This in particular seems like a release where Games Workshop's really treading on rules to nudge people into buying stuff. In particular, the Wardens of Ultramar just look like a fairly flatly overpowered unit for the Space Marines and also include for the Ultramarines right now. That leaves Nekrosor Ammentar only just beating them out into second place. He's the creepy new Destroy All Life Destroyer Lord assailing Ultramar. He's a bigger character model and again pays a bit of a premium for that, a similar price to say bite-mounted characters like Saboden Khan. And again his rules seem kind of immense really. Fights first on a big damage stat line, useful lone operative things near destroyers, and perhaps a surprisingly wide-ranging and powerful damage boost. Seems popular for an army that's quite a popular army in itself in Necrons, plus having a pretty well-received creepy nice model. It seems there was only going to be one winner for model popularity though, and that is indeed the Catan Shard of the Nightbringer. Vastly more popular than the other releases, though all of those are at least doing kind of well compared with regular 40k releases. 390 people saying that they wanted to pick up him, which going by my usual weightings of what people say they buy to what they'll actually buy, amounts to around about 1 in 6 40k hobbyists watching All Tactics, which makes him a rather spectacularly popular model. It's the same price as the Void Dragon, and I feel like he's just going to appeal to people on every level. It's one of people's favourite new miniatures to come recently, with a rather spectacular imagination of the Necron Grim Reaper, and Games Workshop again certainly seem to be pushing him with rules, getting a massive rules boost with speed and durability, and barely changing on the points cost, to the point where he's just kind of overpowered really. I'd absolutely expect him to be appearing in a bunch of Necron lists, though I'd also very much expect a points increase down the line. Let me know which miniatures you would be looking at picking up. The pre-order times are these ones for the links down in the video description. At those stores they're going live between midnight Eastern time in the USA and Canada, and then between 10 and midday elsewhere in the world. Probably the main thing to be there early for is the Destroyer discount box set. I'd guess that's probably going to sell out, and to be honest I'd be surprised if discounters get too much of that. So if really wanting that, it might be one to seek out on the Games Workshop web store. Moving on from the things coming out this weekend, we've got a new Autarch sculpt called the Path of Command revealed. This was shown off by Games Workshop on Monday. It turns out that this one's going to be the store anniversary miniature for 2026, so the usual offering is to be able to purchase it for 1 week from brick and mortar Games Workshop stores in the week coinciding from when they were first opened up. For some people that won't be too hard to organise. For a lot of people that's just not really something they're going to be able to do due to being too far away, and it could be kind of annoying for people that really want to get their hands on this sculpt specifically. They might rely on people reselling it online. It'd likely be going for somewhat similar to the standard character prices, maybe around about £27 or $45 or so. The miniature itself is a pretty nice one, armed with fusion pistol and starglaive, and it's got a helmet in a similar sort of style to the Fire Dragons. If you're looking to pick up an Autarch miniature though, he still might be a bit of a second pick compared with the more flexible one on foot. If you're collecting Eldar and don't have an Autarch, you might be more tempted by the one with the bigger choice of war gear options. For those that already have him or just particularly like this sculpt though, it's quite a nice one, and kind of makes me wonder if they might do a similar sort of one for the event exclusive miniature. Last year we had 2 Genestealer Cult offerings. This one is limited edition, but they don't say that it's necessarily never going to be sold in any other format in the future. That one's fairly common with these now, so at some point it might get a wider release, maybe similar to that Hunter Strikes one that's going to be going up on the web store in the not too distant future. Here's a few more pictures of the model, and I guess you'd be weighing it up against the other Autarch ones. Here's the multi-part one and the Wayleaper one with the swooping hawk wings as the 2 other ones that they sell on a more permanent basis. They also have an Age of Sigmar offering as well, called Corthrain the Crimson Blade. He's quite a fun Vampire Lord sculpt, nice enough for Age of Sigmar players or people who just want a painting product I suppose. Before we move on to Warhammer World USA and more, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in the Magnet Baron. They're one seller of all things neodymium based in the USA, and have lots of magnet offerings tailored to 40k needs. Magnets are certainly a big thing that I've embraced in my hobby. They're particularly good for certain modular kits like Lehman Russes or Knights. It's just quite nice to be able to have all the bits that you can swap in and out. And it's quite fun rearming them with say a Punisher Gatling cannon or a great big anti-tank gun, and switching up the experience game to game while looking the part, or changing things up when Games Workshop inevitably switch all the rules around. The Magnet Baron aims to help that out with a bunch of tailored kits to certain Warhammer 40k plastic kits. One example is their Canis Rex Knight kit here. Some of their offerings are more fancy like this one, where you basically have a whole bunch of 3D printed components that pair with the magnets, and it means that you can assemble this entire thing without any drilling, aiming to make it just a bit easier for people less familiar with this side of the hobby. They have full instructions for using these style ones on their site. They've got lots of other offerings though, all different sizes of shapes and magnets, and a few other useful things like their flight stand bundles, which are quite nice for some chunkier hover tanks. You can check them out, linked down in the video description if you'd like to, and they also have their YouTube channel linked there as well for some magnetising tutorials. Getting back to it though, and Games Workshop has recently just announced a Warhammer World is appearing in the USA, so from the name of it, they're trying to make something somewhat equivalent to their Nottingham HQ based in the UK, which I must admit is really quite a cool place to have it quite so tailored to the hobby, and attracts really quite a good number of visitors to go and see it and have a look at all the things to offer there. As someone who's been there a fair bit, it certainly feels like a good thing that more people would get the opportunity to go and see it. The one in the UK has got lots of stuff going on. It's got a pretty cool gaming space with themed castle walls all around it, and some particularly fun and high effort tables that you can play on. Lots of cool thematic terrain that you might not get in more normal hobby stores. It's got a pretty spectacular and enormous miniature exhibit that's well worth seeing. Both lots of cool painted miniatures on parade, plus some spectacular dioramas of armies fighting against each other, with some pretty fun dioramas and battle scenes. The Rhino parked outside and the Space Marine statue are both good. It does have an absolutely enormous store, of course, stocking a fair few things that you don't normally get in standard Games Workshop stores, like having a big supply of Forge World models. As well as more casual gaming, they also have pretty regular events as well, often catering to their other game systems that aren't just 40k. Though of course there are plenty of those as well. They also have quite a nice bar and restaurant on the site. I guess at least a fair bit of that is going to be replicated in the USA. They did say it's not going to be a one-for-one copy or anything like that, so the offering might be a bit different. Definitely feels like something that I'd be interested to watch though. They said it's going to be opening its doors in 2027. The location of it is going to be just outside Washington DC, and with the USA being pretty enormous, that's going to be a bit handier for some than others. Though there wouldn't be any one location that would please everyone, I suspect. Seems pretty good news for anyone it's particularly handy for though. and perhaps is overall another sign of Games Workshop just doing rather well as a company at the moment if they're making this kind of investment in a big deal showpiece thing. Next up, I saw a few reports of a couple of unusual things for Necrons on the Warhammer app associated with the updates recently. First up, the Nekrosor Ammentar datasheet on the Warhammer 40k app appears to have a 5+ Fear No Pain listed on it, which if so would be a pretty enormous durability buff for him personally, though to be honest is already kind of crazy powerful even if he didn't get this. The datasheet download version from the Warhammer community page just has that sort of Gloom Prism style special rule where you get a save against mortal wounds and psyche attacks, and that goes out to units near him. I guess it remains to be seen which one turns out to be the real one, unless Games Workshop state otherwise, though I'd go with the downloaded one from Warhammer Community. In general, they tend to be more accurate compared with the Warhammer 40k app, and for most updates it's the app that tends to be an interpretation of their datasheets rather than the other way around. Annoyingly though, Games Workshop have occasionally muddied the waters where the app has been more correct compared with the download, so it's maybe not as 100% cut and dry as it might have been previously. I can't 100% confirm that this one hasn't been updated yet, as I don't have the Necrons unlocked on the app. If it is a mistake, Games Workshop often tends to just patch these quietly. As well as Ammentar, I did see a few people reporting that the Catan shards seem to be listed at 0 points in the Pantheon of Woe. That's probably more funny than anything else, given that's clearly not right. When I checked on the app myself, it does look like they've been fixed and they're the normal points cost as best I can see. But I don't think too many people were going to try and get away with claiming that their Catan are 0 points here. I have a feeling that if you try to do that, you might not find yourself all that many games. We're around 7 days away at the moment from the next Warhammer 40k reveal show, and Games Workshop have given us plenty of idea as to what to expect for that. By their teasers from that reveal trailer, it looks like we might get things for Iron Warriors and Dark Angels Ravenwing, judging by their pin badges, the pirate hat showing Corsairs of some sort, that could be referring to Red Corsairs or Eldari Corsairs or both. We're already going to be confirmed to see the rest of Huron's command squad, and then we know there's something Blood Bowl and maybe Bone Reapers for Age of Sigmar. In the last video I thought this picture was basically hinting at Red Corsairs or Eldari Corsairs, but a bunch of people pointed out that the elf lady in this one clutching the Blood Bowl thing is probably a teaser for that game system instead. There were a bunch of people suggesting that it could be a high elf Blood Bowl team, though I guess it's a bit moot as to whether or not this is specifically hinting at Eldari Corsairs, as we know they're coming either way. We at least know that there's Prince Iriel, some jump packs, a new Viper, and potentially a new Psyker as well, all coming out fighting the Red Corsairs in that Maelstrom campaign book. Over this week, Games Workshop's produced really quite a lot of content on Warhammer Community for the 500 Worlds, a whole bunch of lore articles and previews for their other game systems in there. There was one talking about the Ultramarine reclamation in general and the chapters involved, lots of Ultramarine successors fighting for the extremities of their realm. They named the Tetrarchs with Agamemnon and Felix of the Ultramarines chapter themselves, and the other two are Captain Porton of the Genesis chapter and Captain Balthus of the Doom Eagles. Titus himself has a more central coordinating role, with his second company all being ready to commit to reserves where they're most needed, and as we know it sounds like they're seeing action against the Necrons on the Vespertor front on the east of Ultramar. They gave a list of the different successor chapters that are fighting and their heraldry, which I thought was kind of fun. Another one ran through the characters of the Wardens of Ultramar and fleshed out their backstory a little bit. Metoris and Gadriel most people will be fairly familiar with. Titus' veteran sergeant mentor from the Secret Level animation, and Gadriel from Space Marine 2. They stated that he got promoted to Ancient during the defense of a Hive Mordecai against the Tyranids, rallying Astra Militarum to hold a gate with his oratory. And after the second company's Ancient was slain, Titus recommended him be promoted to the duty. Then we've got Astropath Cornelius, who's particularly skilled, very fearless of the warp, and unusually abrasive and grumpy. The diplomat lady has an unusual amount of authority invested in her by the Ultramarines, and on multiple occasions has managed to bring worlds back into the fold without needing any blood to be spilt. Gaius Silver, the Fleet Master, commands the Navy from the Emperor-class battleship Magnificence Enthroned, and is kept well busy by vast crusade fleets needing to be coordinated by him. And then Amelia Minervus is a commander of the 30th Macragge Defence Auxiliary, sort of Ultramarines-flavoured Imperial Guard, and strives to apply quite a lot of teachings of the Codex Astartes to her command. Given all that backstory, all very high and mighty important characters within Ultramar, I do find it just particularly funny that Games Workshop's given them a datasheet that's 90 points and all very tanky, and it basically makes sense just to throw them forward onto mid-board objectives as cannon fodder, which I'm not sure will be overall helpful for Titus's 500 Worlds campaign, if he did have all these very important mortals fighting on the front line for no good reason. Finally, for the lore articles, we got one on Nekrosor Ammentar. We had a few details on him already. Apparently he's referred to an it rather than a he, so perhaps going for a bit more of a creature than a person. And Nekrosor is its title in a similar way to sort of Nemesis Zandrak. As we know, he is possibly the genesis of the Destroyer virus that makes Necrons want to destroy all life, and has a particularly potent aura of psychosis that affects Necrons of all levels of society, including higher-ups like Overlords. For any that do successfully resist, he can always capture them and just forcibly convert them to destroyers. This big enemy of the Ultramarines on the Vespeta front is apparently able to coordinate a good amount more grand strategy than the average Destroyer Lord, and he has his mad plan to put the Catan shards of the Nightbringer back together. And in the article they said that one reason for the conflict was that there's a Catan shard within Ultramar, which apparently will be one of his goals for his campaign. I'll certainly be interested to cycle back to talk about his lore and how the battles unfold against Titus once we get a bit more news from the book. Then, paired with the lore articles, we've also had some gameplay articles for the boarding actions and narrative sections of the book. The narrative section does look like quite a fun one to me. I feel like it's quite nice to see a narrative option that's not just going for the Crusade way of playing things, which, while it does have its fun stuff, isn't really the only way that you can play 40k in a non-competitive setting. The Vespator front campaign is aimed to be fairly general purpose, so not just playable just by the Ultramarines and Necrons, but any 2 or 3 alliances. And then you have a system where you fight over planets on a great big star chart, as you can see here. Having battles on individual planets where the attackers can assail the planets. As you fight, you gain power levels over that planet, and you record your progress with little stickers as per the different allegiances and how they're doing. There's some advantages to be gained by engaging the opponents in the different environments on the planet. They gave an example of a jungle one which has some twists, and it looks like on the random roll you can either have it so melee weapons are -1 strength for a game, or you can't fire Overwatch. So while that might not be the biggest deal for some matchups, occasionally it could give one player a bit more of an uphill struggle potentially. And you also have some ways to do some tactical things and gain advantages not just on the battlefield, with deploying fleet power to where it's needed and building up infrastructure on planets. The way that the attackers try and assail the planet is determined by them, and they get to choose one of the 5 attack missions to hit the defenders with a bunch of new missions in the book. Seems quite nice to me to get a self-contained campaign for this one, and feels like gameplay-wise, unless you're super into boarding actions, it's probably the main draw to actually buy the thing. The other book besides the lore is the boarding actions one called Dread Incursions. So this one's the sort of 500-point game mode fought either on the boarding actions terrain or the recent Necron terrain, which is also having a re-release this week. They've got 6 missions on both of the terrain sets, a campaign system for an aggressor and a defender to fight across multiple missions, and then a new boarding patrol both for the Ultramarines and the Necrons, the Necron one apparently led by some Cryptex. On the article for that one they previewed a couple of the missions, including one where you have to loot some gear trapped in a Necron sarcophagus. There were a couple of fairly cool digital animations coming out over the week, one of them being a new animated trailer for the Orks going into battle for the new Dawn of War. Pretty fun to see them in action fighting against the Blood Ravens. That kind of harks back a bit to that first Dawn of War trailer that had them duking it out with Predator tanks and Dreadnoughts that felt quite ahead of its time in terms of animation quality. You get to see a few cool units in action on either side, some attacks from the Blood Raven Librarian, some flash kits in action and a bunch of Phobos Marines dispatching them, and then the entrance of the Warboss Gorgots himself, cutting through the enemies and despite being spaced able to make his escape with a teleport, and all ready to combat fighting no doubt. Well worth a watch in my opinion, and they had a couple of pretty excellent Orky moments in there as well. Quite like the Orc boy yelling they're getting away, and then Gorgot's just backhanding him across the ship. Looks like you don't steal the boss's kill. And particularly at the end, when he drives his rock towards the planet, one of the Orcs says that they're crashing, so with Orky logic, the boss tells him to crash faster, and boots up all the engines. Pretty fun stuff overall. I guess we'll get some other ones for the other factions. We already had that animated teaser with the lion. That wasn't all for animated Warhammer though, as we got a few more details as to the next Warhammer Plus animations. They've said the next 3 Warhammer 40k ones, which will be coming out in 2026, and most of them look nicely enough executed by the little preview shots for them. They've got one called Adeptus Sororitas Penitence, which is a 3-part one, and looks like it's focusing on the Sacred Rose fighting against Orks so far. Maybe that'll be their only antagonist, or perhaps there'll be some more foes entering the fray. There's one called Aeronautica, focusing on the Aeronautica Imperialis, I suppose. It looks like they've got some Imperial fighters engaging some Eldari planes, which looks like that's probably a bit of a suicide mission. That one's also going to be in 3 parts. And then there's a World Eaters episode for the Hammer and Bolter ones, and that one's called Butcher's Nails. Generally looks like fun stuff for those who do have Warhammer Plus anyway, which as ever isn't necessarily embraced by everyone, and depends on whether you get enough value from it over the course of the year between their streaming content, animations, limited miniature and Battleforge thing. Then rounding up a whole bunch of other small topics at least relatively quickly, it seems that Games Workshop started the new year by issuing a Million Miniatures painting challenge. This one's run through their Warhammer stores, so it's an in-person sort of thing. The idea is that if you have one locally, you can go down there and pledge to paint somewhere between 25 or 100 miniatures by the 9th of May. And if you do so, then you get a few small freebies for doing so, a pin badge for 25 miniatures, a stand for a water pot for 50, and then a paintbrush tin for 100. So almost sort of accessories to accessories for painting, but I guess could be some use to some people if you were going to paint that many anyway. Apparently they're going to be counting up how many miniatures get painted by each store, and obviously as well as being a bit of fun community engagement, it's also a bit of a sales gimmick as well too. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to sell you an extra 10 miniatures or so if you were just shy of one of the targets. Games Workshop announced their miniatures of the year. It looks like their 40k ones from the votes they conducted had Logan Grimnar placing in first, then Fulgrim, Ethon Shan, and the Phoenix Lord Lycus in fourth. There really were quite a lot of fun miniatures released across 2025. The one that you guys voted on the channel had miniatures in a similar kind of order, just scrambled around a bit. We had Ethon Shan, then Logan Grimnar, then Lycus, Infinity's Lament, and then Fulgrim in that order. There was some fairly stiff competition and close votes for the top spot. As well as announcing that, Games Workshop also had a few of their year by the numbers things. Maybe not too surprising that Known Oil is their single most popular sold paint, and then Lead Belcher and Abaddon Black tied for second place. Certainly all things I use a good bit of in my hobby. The most watched Warhammer Plus thing was the Kill Lupercal animation. That's the big stompy ones with the Titans, and by their own count they've released 75 miniatures with tactical rocks to stand on throughout 2025. Always good for making your heroes just feel that little bit above the rest. For another Warhammer store thing, they've also got an Ammentar Servitor as a free miniature of the month. Maybe not the single most exciting offering they've ever done for these ones where you can call in store and in theory get a miniature for free, but I feel like also maybe at least a fairly general purpose one. Not awful to have a background character from a whole bunch of 40k armies out there. Feels like you could make use on a scenic base or diorama or something. Here's from the Ammentar Servitor Battleclade box set, and they're around about £4 or $7 if you take the models on individual value, but there are some more valuable ones in the box set, such as the Underseer and the Techno-Archaeologist. These ones went available from the 3rd of January, so it's possible that a good few stores might have already run out now. I'm not 100% sure how well their stock goes globally with these, but I believe they only have a certain amount to hand them out each month. It also varies around the world a bit. Some stores in the world require you to assemble them in stores, some of them don't. So for some places it's super easy just to call in and pick them up literally for free, other ones you might need to spend at least a tiny bit of hobby time then and there. People generally seem pretty hyped for the return of Commissar Yarrick, which Games Workshop teased in one of their lore articles. I did see a couple of places where people posted this image claiming that it was a leak of Yarrick, where it's more sort of digital kit bash made for fun, I think by an account going by Geo's Hobbyforge. I'm wondering whether we will get Yarrick as a more normal infantry character, or whether they'll try and do something a bit more big and chunky to sell us, maybe building him up with a command team on a scenic base or something like that. I think this take on him looks nice enough personally. I just see some people saying that it looks a little bit on the young side to be Yarrick, and that his bionic eye is on the wrong side, but I feel like for a reimagination of him it looks nice enough really, and if you change those couple of details it could look the part nicely enough. Finally, for one last teaser from Games Workshop, we have a Rumour Engine, some bit of a as yet unrevealed rumour, looking like some tubing hanging from some flames. I feel like it's suitably non-specific that it could either be from Age of Sigmar or 40k, though my instincts might say Sigmar myself personally. I saw someone had pointed it out on Reddit that it could be potentially paired with a sort of bellows and low-tech flamer style thing that we saw earlier. I guess you could have this as a sort of like gas pipe, and then it gets shot out the nozzle and ignited by that torch. The rivets on it at least look kind of similar. In any case, quite a lot to round up there. Let me know your thoughts on all the happenings. Would you be looking to pick up any of the Space Marines or Necrons over the weekend? What do you make of the new Autarch and the Warhammer World in the USA? I look forward to hearing all your takes down in the comments. As mentioned, check out the channel's affiliate discount retailers at GoTime. There'll be links down in the video description. Finally, thanks to the Magnet Baron for sponsoring this one. As mentioned earlier, feel free to check them out for any fancy neodymium things for your armies. As well as specific sets for Warhammer kits, they've got a magnetising starter bundle, a bunch of drill bits, a pin vise, applicators, glue and magnets that could be handy as a one-click shop if you do want to dip a toe in this side of the hobby. They do of course have all magnets of different shapes and sizes, and ones that are maybe a bit more reliably good than certain cheaper ones out there, and they have some interesting flush fit ones that are the right size to fit under Citadel bases for those using magnetic storage systems. Besides knights and other common ones, they've got lots of other sets for the other Warhammer 40k kits out there. Most of the common things that you'd want to magnetise have options. And they do have those flight stands as well. I particularly like those for bigger, chunkier hover tanks, giving you a fairly stable base, will fall off the magnet before it just snaps. Check them out, linked in the video description, and thanks to them for sponsoring this one. I'll leave that there for now though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming with new ones out each day. If you'd like to support the channel, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below. Channel patrons get a few advantages, entry to the regular giveaways, seeing occasional videos early, and regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel. In any case, an enormous thanks for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.